Hello, everyone. Miles here from the team at Iconic. I have the pleasure today to be joined by Andy Polaine, who is one of our speakers at this year's Product Design Week, speaking on the Design Leaders stage on the 12th and 13th, 11th and 12th of November. Andy's going to be joining us on the 11th. So, Andy, I'm going to hand the mic straight to you and just ask you to please introduce a bit about yourself, what your current role is, what do you do, and let's start there, and then I want to learn a bit about your background.
Okay, so right now I spend most of my time coaching design leaders. So, and that's everyone from, probably kind of lead, sometimes senior, so people who wanted to get into design leadership or moving into a management or leadership position, right there the way up to, I think I had a CDO, but certainly sort of VPs and heads of. And that's the bulk of what I do. I also do occasionally kind of train people and groups and teams in, I particularly, service design, but I also do workshops in things like storytelling and presentation and pitching and stuff like that. And I do a few other things. I have like everyone, I have a newsletter and a podcast, and those kinds of things to support that work.
Very exciting. What do you want to do a little plug for if people want to go and check out your podcast?
So that's right. So the podcast is called Power of 10. And you'll find it if you search for my name and Power of 10 in wherever you get your podcasts, then you'll find it there. The newsletter is called Doctor's Note. And actually the easiest place to find all of that stuff is my website, which is just polaine.com, my surname.com.
All right. Well, we'll be sure to tag that in our post as well when we share this. But you mentioned service design, and that's a specialism of yours, and that's really, I think, my understanding where you started in that world. So tell me a bit about your trajectory to coaching and leading people.
It's not actually where I started. I actually started in the early 90s doing what's now would be known as kind of interaction design and UX. Back then it didn't have a name. So I'm talking like 1993, 94. I originally wanted to be a filmmaker, hence my interest in storytelling. And I studied film, video, photography, and this new thing called digital media in 1990, 91. And then had co-founded a fairly successful collective. It's a new media collective called Anti-ROM in the 90s. We did a lot of non-commercial work, sort of arts installations and performances and things, but we also did quite a lot of commercial work for clients like Levi's and the BBC and things. Then I sort of moved through that world. I had a brief stint at Razorfish when it was back in the day. Went through that whole sort of .com boom and bust. And my first sort of taste of leadership, I would say, was a company called Animal Logic in Australia, where I was there to set up their interactive department. So I was about 29, 30 at that point. So that's been my sort of career. And then sort of I've always had one foot in academia and one foot in commercial design work. And I've enjoyed those two. And sometimes the balance of those has changed. And really, through all that time, both in my teaching, from undergraduate to doctoral students, as well as in my commercial work and having teams of designers and people like that, I've always done a lot of mentoring and coaching of those people. And then in my last role before I became independent again, I was regional design director for APAC at Fjord, that are now Accenture Song, and so a lot of my job was doing that as well for those people. And when I decided to leave, I really sat down and thought about what are the things I really enjoy doing. And training and was one of the things, and then coaching was one of the other things that came up. And the coaching is the thing that I've really sort of lent into, and I'm in my 5th year of it now and really enjoying it. And you have frozen for me. We'll edit this bit out. going to hit stop here, I think, for now.
Hello, everyone. Miles here from the team at Iconic. I'm joined today by Andy Polaine, who will be speaking this November the 12th at the Design Leaders Conference, a part of Product Design Week, which is a week-long event exploring how user-centered design impacts technology and the products and services that we use on a day-to-day. There's content there for everyone at all levels. So Andy's going to be talking at the event this November. Andy, I'd like to hand the mic to you and just ask you to please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do currently.
Hi, so I'm Andy Polaine. I have been loosely in digital design for the last just over 30 years. I started very early as what's now known as sort of probably interaction design. Well, actually now it would be known as product, but really interaction design and UX. But it was a bit more than that. Back then in the early 90s, we were really sort of exploring this new medium. It was called new media back then. And we were trying to sort of understand it. And then set up a collective called Anti-ROM, co-founded that in the 90s and went through the whole kind of .com boom and bust and been in lots of different areas, leadership roles and so on. And my last role before I became independent, which was about 5 years ago, was as the regional design director for APAC at Fjord, which is now Accenture Song. What I do now, and the thing I spend my days doing, is coaching design leaders. And that's everything from probably sort of leads and senior people who are just wanting to get into that leadership role or about to, people who've just started on that pathway, right the way through to, I think I had one CDO, right the way through to sort of VPs and heads of, and those kinds of people. So people in executive roles too. And that's mostly what I'm doing. I occasionally do some training of teams in service design, in other sort of areas of design and storytelling and pitching and things like that. And I have a podcast called Power of 10, and I have a newsletter called Doctor's Note, all of which you'll find at polaine.com.
Awesome. You covered everything there. I think that's all a great summary. And if you wouldn't mind me asking, I mean, you've given a really awesome overview of your trajectory in your career.
Yeah.
But out of interest, are there any kind of key moments in your career that you're particularly proud of that have brought you through to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, when anyone ever answers this question, it sounds like they've really carefully planned their career. And actually, I've just had a coaching session talking to someone about this, which is it's way more random than anyone really kind of likes to admit. And so looking back on it, I genuinely went towards the things that I thought seems like a good idea at the time. I guess the thing for me that's probably a bit defining is this collective that I co-founded, Anti-ROM, out of college. There's a bunch of us who studied together, and one of our lecturers, Andy Cameron. And that was the beginning of my career. So it was sort of moderately successful. So we ended up working with people like Levi's and the BBC and Science Museum, those kinds of people. And it was a little bit of sort of pioneering days, and no one really knew about this stuff. I mean, all the kind of product folks now, they don't know the history of this stuff. But it was a collective, and we had a flat structure. And we were all equal shareholders of this little group. There's ended up being 10 of us in the end. And so I didn't have that experience of having a sort of leader above me and a kind of creative director or an art director or any of those people as role models, really. And in some respects, that's meant I've just had to kind of find my own way. And in other respects, I quite like it. I still have a healthy disregard for hierarchy. I do think, though, there were a couple of moments where I realized, so I became the interactive director at a company called Animal Logic. They're a visual effects company in Australia. And I was there to set up their interactive department. And I think, I was just kind of inexperienced really at the time. And I did some things right. I hired lots of really great people. And there were other things, though, that, I probably didn't do so well. One of the things that really got me, and this is what I often talk about, and this is what I'm going to talk about, is there was this moment of realizing, I'm shifting from an identity of someone who makes stuff for a living to someone who enables other people to make stuff. And that shift in identity, I went through a real kind of dip because there's a whole load of stakeholder management skills and all that kind of stuff that you also have to learn. And at the same time, I was sort of letting go of my daily practice on the tools. And I call it a dip because I felt like there was this moment in time where you're not really good at either one, and you're sort of in this dip in the middle. And it's a bit of an existential crisis, I think. So I had that quite early. I think a lot of people have that around the sort of late 30s to late 40s. I certainly had it. I had it a bit younger, about around 29, 30, I think. And it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot. That was a sort of pivotal moment for me. There's loads. I mean, I've been around quite a long time. I think one of the things that was really clear to me when I was at Fjord was how much, no one ever really came to me saying, "Hey, Andy, we're really stuck designing this. We don't know how to design this thing." That's just not a thing. Once people have got some experience under their belt, they kind of know how to design. The problems were sometimes there was that, and occasionally it was often in like synthesis and analysis, of sort of looking at the research and what should we be making. Maybe I had some input there, but the big thing was it was 99% people stuff. Now, all the problems my design teams came to me with was people stuff, and was either amongst themselves or with stakeholders in Accenture or the client. And I think that's a thing that then, weirdly enough, doesn't get taught in design school, right? And well, I do. I try and teach my students that because I still teach, but it's sort of a thing you just learn as you go up through the ranks. So that was a sort of and there were some pivotal realizations and insights that I had in that role, and then coaching for the last sort of 4.5 years.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that speaks very nicely to why we've created the Design Leaders Plus conference, with especially that Stepping into Leadership Day, which are joining us with this nature of you've learned all of these craft skills, now you're going into leadership. These are different skills that you'll probably not learn, and it's soft skills and it's strategic skills that you need to adopt in order to have that right trajectory you're anticipating. But we're going to be getting into very quickly, very shortly, the crux of your talk, which you'll be bringing this November. And you've already alluded to it here. But whilst we're on the subject of your career, you mentioned some really exciting moments that you're particularly proud of. Are there any, for people who are listening in, thinking about, and I know you're yourself and inspiring people in leadership and coaching. Are there people along your trajectory, be it in literature or professional career, where they've helped you adopt skills and learn along that way?
Oh, yeah, there's loads of people. I mean, when I mentioned Animal Logic, actually, it was the creative director there, Bruce Carter. He was really interesting because he used to kind of be fascinated by what happens if I put these two people together. And often it was like two people who might explode a little bit. And he was very much kind of interested in that, exploring the team actually as a sort of design object, if you like. And what happens if I put these people together, and how can I kind of get this person to challenge them in some way? And so I learned a lot from him, particularly as to sort of not take the whole thing so seriously. I think he used to have quite a lot of fun with that. I think, there's obviously, I know there's people like Peter Merholz, who's, he's kind of speaking, his book of Org Design for Design Orgs, the whole kind of bunch of people like that. Certainly as I've sort of moved up through my career, I read a lot, I write a lot too. And get the chance with the podcast actually to speak to lots of different people. So I would say, everyone that I've coached, all of my students, all the people I've worked with, and certainly all the people I've had as guests have all influenced me in some way or another. I'm quite a sort of a leech like that. I'll kind of pull all sorts of different pieces. And I read quite broadly. I think the other thing that really influences what I do is my wife is a psychoanalyst. She follows the school of C.G. Jung and that whole world, and I've read very deeply into that. Informs my coaching a lot too, actually.
I really appreciate that, and thanks for going into the depth there. Well, let's talk about your talk then, because you've already alluded to it. It's a subject that's obviously fascinated you from your career, that working in Australia.
Yeah.
This idea of the dip. And I wonder, could you give us a bit of an insight into what does that mean, and what's really inspired? Well, we know what's inspired this topic, but why perhaps is it such a relevant topic now for the current state of UX?
So I I'm a bit wary of the current state of UX thing because there's a lot of noise out there as well, on LinkedIn stuff and woe is us and everything's falling apart. It's definitely going through a transition. And I think one of the things perhaps about being, I can't believe I am, but, being an older guy now is, I've seen those cycles. And I definitely feel like in each cycle, it's not like we go back round and everything's the same again. Each cycle leaves things slightly different and emerges slightly different. I think, we definitely have gone through a cycle where there's been this whole boom of hiring massively and then this retraction that a lot of people are suffering from. And obviously, it's a recalibration. There's the sort of spectre of AI there too. I think that, we will start, I get the feeling I've got like really weak signals with not really kind of very strong data, but I've got a kind of a bit of a feeling that we're sort of coming out of the bottom of that cycle at the moment and things will emerge and something new will emerge and it'll be interesting and design will play a role, I'm very sure. So that's one thing which is, I know it's not much help if you're really struggling to find a job, but it's sort of in terms of sort of existential sort of career crisis, I would say, it will pass and it will transition into something else. The dip is really this, what I talked about before, this idea that, you give up one identity as a sort of designer and you start having to forge another one. So that's part of it. And you have this sort of crisis of who am I? Right? Because I think for a lot of people in design, they identify very heavily with their craft on a personal level. And, maybe this is true of, I don't know, accountants and people like that too, but it's not my impression. And so I think, as you go through that thing, it's not just, I'm changing what I do for a living. And it's actually, you're having a kind of a bit of a personality change, or at least a kind of purpose change. And no one really tells you. There's a whole bunch of things around confidence. There's a whole bunch of things around loneliness. It can be quite lonely at the top. It's the thing I hear a lot in coaching, which is I'm the only person at my level with a design background. All of my peers are sort of business people. And I've got all these anxieties and worries, and who do I talk to? And the answer is obviously to me as your coach, but that's why I'm there. So partly there's all of that stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff around storytelling and how do I talk about the work and how do I sort of split my language. And Peter Meerholz has talked about this a bit of sort of managing up, sideways and downwards. How do I talk? I sort of talk design to designers, but I don't really want to be talking design to the business folks because they don't really care. And all of that stuff. And there's a whole bunch of things to learn. And so I say it's a dip. It's actually sort of a bit more of a kind of roller coaster, really. I've changed my diagram on that one. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about, because I think the reason why I do the coaching, the reason why I'm planning to write a book about this, or I've started writing a book about this, I want to talk about it, is because it seems to be a thing that people don't talk about much, which is that sort of inner journey of that process. There's a lot of very tactical stuff around setting up teams and things, but I actually think the inner sort of psychological journey of what that's like isn't spoken about enough. And I just wish that, I want to create the content, or that I wish someone had sort of said to me, hey, read this book before that happened to me. So that's what that talk is really about.
Well, we're very much looking forward to seeing that book, and I'll be sure to give it a read when it comes out. But yeah, really excited to welcome you. I think the topic's going to be really eye-opening for people going through this challenge, tackling that imposter syndrome. But what you mentioned a few of the things you'll cover, the stories, etc. What do you hope attendees, quite like practically minded, will walk away from with this presentation?
Yes, there's two bits. I'm very aware of the kind of practically minded thing, because I said before, there's quite a lot of tactical stuff out there. So you can tell people, go and read Peter's book about, how you might set up the design team or kind of map out career pathways and all those things. I'm not going to do that much. There are some things that are around talking about design, or talking about trying to kind of get things done, and stakeholder management and influence that I'll talk about. There's some practical tips in there. But there's also some other stuff around how you might work out, what am I all about and what's my purpose, and those kinds of things in the organization. Because having a kind of sense of like your own value proposition is quite useful. There's another thing that I talk about quite often, which is this idea that, so if you've been a designer who's facilitated quite often, and it's often the case with designers, they often get roped in to do the facilitation of workshops. One of the things I realized, and this was at Fjord actually, was oh, this is like slow motion facilitation, right? So that, and I'm going to talk about that a bit of what I mean by that in the talk, and that you can use a lot of the tools and mindsets that you already have as a designer in that leadership role, rather than feeling like I have to set that all aside and sort of become a suit or a robot now. So that's going to be there. And really, the thing I really hope people get away from it, take away from it, is, oh, it's not just me. You know, if people kind of get comfort from that, that's probably the most important thing, because that's actually what gives you confidence in the end.
Yeah, definitely. I can see you getting swamped after the talk for people to come and chat a bit more about it. So my final question really about the talk is to help people who are considering why they might come and listen to your talk. Who is the person that's going to take the value from this? Who do you think this audience should be for your talk?
Yeah. Well, there's the spectrum, really, you know, I which is probably my coaching spectrum. There are people who are thinking, well, you know, my next role, the next step in my career is to get into a leadership role. And, you know, how do I do that? How do I sort of mentally prepare for that? I think probably the sweet spot is going to be people who are already in that role, or just at the beginning, like they've just been promoted and are having that moment of like, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing here. You know, I'm going to get found out any moment. This should be very helpful for them. But really all the way through up to people who've been established in those roles for quite a long time, because I coach a lot of those people, and I can tell you a lot of those people are also saying, I don't know what I'm doing here, and I'm going to get found out. So I think, you know, people going through that career transition, or about to, or wanting to, as well as people who have already been in it, should find something useful from it, I hope.
Great. Well, if that's you, and you're watching this video, tickets are on sale. You can grab a ticket now, come down, listen to Andy's talk, chat to him, and hopefully there's going to be some really exciting nuggets there from Andy and all the other exciting speakers that we've got joining us, including Peter, who Andy's alluded to today. So I want to just talk a little bit about your perception on the industry. You already talked about this current state of UX, but when we are at this kind of advent of AI, there is a lot of transition. There's, you know, you've talked about that kind of curve, that growth and recline, I would love to get your sense of what excites you about the future of this craft, considering the tech trends and the everything that's happening. What's exciting you for what can be done in the future with design?
Yeah, I mean, design has gone through this period in the last 15 years of kind of becoming more strategic, and, you know, the proverbial seat at the table and all of that stuff. And then it's kind of gone now the other way, where it's kind of got pushed back onto the assembly line quite often. You know, product has taken a lot of that space, of which I think design sort of wanted to get into. From my perspective, from a sort of service design perspective, I think it's problematic that we've sort of gone back to this sort of industrial way of thinking, you know, with kind of shipping product and stuff, and not really thinking of that kind of multi-ecosystem thing. So I think there's a whole load of work still in that area of in service design to happen, and it's sort of having a bit of a rebirth because of that. I think, though, that there has been this massive growth, and now we're having this sort of retraction, and then there'll be a bit of consolidation. The optimistic side of me thinks that probably what might happen, and this is a thing that's happened, you know, I've seen it happen at least twice, if not 3 times in my career, or my lifetime actually, which is, you know, all of the large management consultancies like Accenture, they sort of hoovered up the medium and large design consultancies. So that whole kind of world has been sort of sucked into there. And, you know, they do what they do, and there's a reason why they do that. And I don't particularly I want to sort of badmouth those people. But what that's also done at the same time as there's been this massive load of layoffs in tech in particular. And that's sort of more social contagion amongst, you know, business leaders than it is out of real need. But nevertheless, you know, they've reallocated their resources. So there's a whole kind of flood of often quite senior designers and design leaders on the market. And what tends to happen is at some point people go, do you know what? I really don't want to work for this kind of large corporate anymore. I'm going to start doing some contracting and some freelancing on my own, and then I'm going to need to get some help on this thing. So I'm going to get another couple of people together, and very quickly you start to get the emergence of a whole little ecosystem of boutique agencies. And because the management consultancies are so expensive, there's a price umbrella there, right? And those companies really work with large brands, got large budgets, and all of that stuff at the enterprise level. But there's a whole bunch of SMEs, small to medium enterprises and small companies who need, and startups and stuff who need design help. And I'm hoping there is a sort of a rebirth of a smaller kind of bunch ecosystem of agencies. I'm hearing it a little bit, and not weirdly, I'm hearing it out of Canada is one of the places where I keep hearing that that's going on. So it could be very sort of regional there. There will be a whole bunch of people who decide to move out of design as well, and that's okay. There were a whole bunch of people post-dot-com boom who moved out of design and found other things to do, and I'm happy in their lives, and that's okay. I think with the AI thing, I'm a sort of AI. I'm certainly not an optimist, but I'm quite skeptical. I'm skeptical about tech booms because I have seen them so often. Do you remember Clubhouse? All of a sudden, everyone was. I'm sure it still exists. I don't even know. It was the darling for a bit, and not to mention the whole sort of crypto thing and stuff. My view on AI is that at the moment it feels exotic because it is this kind of partly because it's being promoted in that way. It seems much smarter than it is at the moment, and for all the kind of talk of but it will get better. There's some things. I've read a really good quote. I can't remember who said it the other day. Said one of the things that it's not very good at is taste and common sense, and that's fortunately one of the things that designers are really really good at. So I think it will probably be like it sort of already is. It just becomes a kind of menu item, right? A drop down item, and it ceases to be this kind of technology that we're wowed by. Because it's this new technology, and it'll just become part of the roster of tools. So I think it's probably worth learning about them and understanding how do they support design. Where do they replace some of the things we do? Where do they do some of the sort of basic work that I then need to kind of clean up and tidy up? Where is it also going to make me really lazy creatively? Because what you saw in, whether it's Photoshop filters or stuff in Flash or Illustrator or any of those things and on Figma is when people are really busy, they will lean on what the tech does, whatever app they're using, they'll lean on what that does well. And so you get this homogeneity, and you kind of just have a look across all the apps on your phone, where everything starts to look the same. And part of that is because they're working at velocity and don't really have the time to consider, or they feel like, this is a done thing, this is a solved problem, let's just use this design pattern. And that makes everything look completely boring. And I suspect, you can already start to see the signature of AI across some stuff already, certainly with images. And so I think, that'll take a while to calm down and for people to start to use it in more creative ways. And I think they will. And how that partnership between the human and the AI kind of pans out, I'm not sure. I do think that if you're in an environment which values that thinking through and what about this and how could it be this and sort of turning stuff up on its upside down and on its head, that's kind of interesting, and you'll probably still use it for that. If you're in an environment that sees, where you have what I'd say sort of badly done product management, which is where the product manager just sees design as a vehicle to get their ideas made tangible to give to engineering, well, then basically those product managers are already kind of prompt writers for design with their requirements documents, and they're just going to do the same, and it's not going to make any difference. Everything will end up looking the same, and at some point, someone will disrupt them with something more interesting. That's my very long-winded view on that whole thing.
No, I like it. It's good to get that kind of that whole get into someone else's mind on what that future is going to look like, and I like the optimistic side more so. I must say, like the new boutique agencies coming, I'm all for that. Yeah, you've seen a lot of them, fall away. So that would be awesome. All right, I've got a couple of last questions.
Yes. Try and be quick.
Let's try the last two. Let's just whiz through them. But this one, I'd love to take a minute on. If you could give some advice to aspiring leaders now, in mind of everything you're going to be speaking about, without giving the secret sauce away, what would that be?
There's only one secret sauce, which is learn to be yourself. Because that's the pathway to being confident. It's the pathway to being able to less nervously tell the story of things. It's the pathway to not having as much stress, because it kind of doesn't really matter. Not many of us are working on life-saving things. And it's the pathway of, really what I'm trying to do all the time in my coaching is reduce that dissonance between, how people are turning up at work or feel they should and who they really are, right? And sort of bring those together. So learning to be yourself. And I guess the other thing, dirty secret, is everyone's making it up as they go along. Right? So just that's your job, right? Especially as a leader, there's no one else telling you what to do. So
you know that
comfortable with that.
You're coaching these people.
Yeah.
No, you've got the secrets. All right, the last two are just a bit of fun. Tell us a fun fact about you people might not know.
I don't know if people do not know this. I play Dungeons and Dragons. I play role-playing games. I've got a whole load of dice here. Die, in fact. There we go. And I'm the dungeon master. I'm the one who sort of helps craft not really the story. We do that as a group, but the scenarios and run the game. And I have a group that I've been playing with for 3 years now, which is remarkable because normally they kind of fall apart. And we were a group of randoms off of Reddit, and now we're good friends. And I've learned a lot actually about leadership and team dynamics and all sorts of things. And I will probably do a little series on that at some point, because I think role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, are a really interesting kind of vehicle for that.
That's really cool. Yeah, where I'm in Brighton, we've got a big saloon sort of. It's like a bar saloon thing with tons of tables, all for role-playing games. Yeah, it's a good laugh. I played once, but I think I loved it.
There's quite a few people actually in the design community who do. I know I've found them on Twitter, and so I think there's at some point I would like to do a little workshop on like designers and dragons or something. I think it'd be quite nice.
That would be wicked. Yeah, maybe we should do a UX Crunch event in the future, which is
exactly
a big how design can play can lead in role play.
Yeah.
Awesome. And my last question then, if you weren't, I think you already mentioned it actually, but if you weren't in research or design, and now coaching, where do you think you might have ended up?
I think, it depends on how far you go back on the sliding doors moment of when did my career change? I think if I go all the way back to what I studied, I mentioned, I wanted to be a film director. And so I think, Christopher Nolan has lived my other life. I like to think he was studied at the same university I was at. He was a couple of years ahead of me. I didn't know him. He was actually on a different campus on a slightly different course. But listening to a sort of interview with him and his career, I was like, oh God, that could have been me. I don't know that I have his talent, but that would be the other area I would have gone into, I think.
That would have been cool. But we would never have got to have this chat and learn about your decorated career as a leader in design. So thanks for joining us and choosing design. But look, it's been a real pleasure to chat to you. For anyone, again, just to repeat, if you're interested in coming down to this November's Design Leaders at Product Design Week, we'll be joined by Andy and many more amazing speakers talking about all the strategic, soft skills and organizational design that is required to make design happen and for you to scale in your career. Andy, any last comments you'd like to leave people before I let you go?
No, the only thing is get in touch. Right? I like connecting with people. LinkedIn's the obvious kind of place. It's the Tinder of work these days. But I think that you find me. If you Google my name, you'll find me. Find my website. Get in touch. And I like to kind of get to know people. And if you're going to be there, let me know.
Awesome. We'll make sure to tag you in our post so people can find you nice and easy. Andy, thank you so much for your time. Really excited to welcome you in November. And thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to being in England in November. I'm sure I will bring an umbrella.
Yeah. Good idea. All right. See you then.
Take care. Okay.